forensic audio editor hears the same faint tick beneath multiple 911 calls and follows it through shuttered buildings, empty parking decks, and her own unreliable memory. It begins with a hiss that isn't a hiss, the whispery grit that Nora Raines can peel apart like onion skin, revealing threads most people never knew were there. She lowers the monitoring volume, closes her eyes to make the room disappear, and rides the swell of a stranger's panic. A man on the line to 911, the reedy edge of fear in his throat, his breath turning thin when he tries to keep his voice from breaking. "He's here," he whispers. In the background, a dog's nails tapping on tile, the faint drag of cloth on a door jamb, and something else. Beneath the noise floor, tucked under the call taker's metered calm, like a burr under a sock, a click that lands every second and a half. Tick, a heartbeat, but metal. Tick, not a clock. She opens her eyes to the edit suite's gray foam walls, the red light at the edge of the console. The newsroom on the other side of the glass is a smear of motion and muted voices. The TV monitors on loop with footage of a shuttered mall and the kind of stock shots that stand in for uncertainty. Police tape, flashing blues on wet asphalt, a close-up of a gloved hand lifting a strand of human hair that might be any fiber at all. Inside the room, the only thing that moves is the time counter, sprinting forward in cold white digits. Nora hits spacebar. The call stops mid-breath. "Anything?" Trina asks through the intercom. Producer voice, brisk, on deadline, a softness reserved for the edit bay. It's why Nora works late. Night makes rooms feel private, even when they're made of glass. "There's a tick under the ambient," Nora says. "Could be a metronome, some old mechanical timer." Think the caller was a musician? Or a killer who likes to keep time, Trina says, because her job is also to give sound bites words. "Push it up if you can. We'll lay it under the B-roll." Nora leans into the waveform, a city skyline flattened to lines. Breath peaks like row houses, a siren rising like a freeway ramp. She isolates the tick, runs a notch filter, removes a 60-cycle hum she didn't hear but knew was there. Every second and a half, exact, a toothy mechanical nip. When she loops it, something in her chest matches it before she tells it not to. Tick, be still. Tick, don't. Got it, she says. She saves the clip under a name that isn't helpful. Tick 01, because she doesn't want to name it anything that sounds like a joke. The call is 2 weeks old. The man who made it is missing and presumed dead. When the package airs, the tick sits almost imperceptibly under slow tracking shots of the mall's locked gates. Viewers who notice it will think the sound is the building, a heating pipe, an old elevator. Trina texts Nora a check mark at 11:38 p.m. and nice pull. And Nora puts on her coat and steps into wind that smells like pennies. The station lot has a fast way of emptying after late news. An engineer smoking by the satellite van. A weather intern carving arcs into frost with his sneakers. A camera operator snapping his trunk shut. Nora tucks her chin, walks to her hatchback, and rests her forehead against the cold roof for a second longer than it takes to fish out her keys. The metal on her chest, no bigger than a matchbox, punctuates the skin with a small square pressure. She reaches inside her sweater and adjusts the device the way she's been taught, not touching skin, with fingers that have been on public doorknobs, always attentive to the angles. She can't open her car without hearing the tick again, and she knows it's not in the lot. Her apartment has a window above a laundromat, and the sound of coins in machines, late-night cycles that make the building feel like it's breathing. Nora boils water, watches the kettle roll, and tries to place the tick in a memory that is not a room with foam walls and LED bars. The kettle lid clicks in the boil, and for a half beat, she thinks her brain is about to make it fit. And then it doesn't. She drinks tea in her coat with the lights off and replays the call on her phone once, loud enough for the laundromat's whine to mask the borrowed fear. Tick. He's here, the man had said, like a confession. Tick. Nora sets the cup down when steam fogs her glasses and brings one hand to the small square under her clavicle, a touch that is as much a habit as it is a test. The cardiologist said she'd forget it was there, and sometimes she does, until she doesn't. In the morning, the newsroom is bright and ordinary, and the mall story is old enough to join the shelf of unsolves that producers pull down and dust off when a lead flares and dies. Nora is given a new assignment: clean up audio for a story about a rural rescue turned body recovery. A vehicle found upside down in a river. Driver gone by the time they pulled him up. The call is from a fisherman who speaks in the same cadence as the river. Slow, reluctant. He tries to say it without making it a story that will be about him. I was casting from the bend near the spruce, he says, and I saw what looked like a bumper, and then, well, somewhere under his words, the river's skin strokes round stones. Nora hears the birds, a far-off truck, and then, like a thread caught on a nail, the same mechanical nip. Tick. She isolates it because that's her job, and because if it is nothing, it will disappear under scrutiny. It doesn't. It's not the fisherman's line counter, too steady, too lonely. It's not his wristwatch. The sound rides the air, not the mic. She pushes the tick up, hears it fold into the water, like a metronome, disguised as current. Somewhere in the back of her head, a door she keeps locked tests its latch. Again? Trina says at the glass. I thought you were messing with me last night. I wasn't, Nora says, and wants to smile, but is afraid it will make the thought real. Again means pattern. Pattern means someone believes in messages. She logs the timestamps in small, neat writing and underlines them, even though she doesn't underline anything else. like she's left breadcrumbs she will be able to find later if she needs to pretend she wasn't the one to drop them. The newsroom assigns her to field the next call because she can clean audio while sitting on the edge of events, and because she's the one who doesn't mind waiting. It's a parking structure downtown, a level that smells like wet brake pads and something sour that clings to concrete. Reporters gather the quotes that frame a day he was quiet. She kept to herself. I saw this once in '98. And Nora plugs her headphones into the portable deck. Police radios braid and unbraid across the band. A woman walking to her car misdials a friend and leaves a voicemail full of keys and the squeak of a grocery cart wheel she didn't return to a corral. In the distance, a rattle, like a ladder shaking, wind tugging at something that doesn't want to go. Nora listens to the air until it says its name. And then there it is, on the skin of the structure, in the flat, gray light. Tick. She snaps her head up as if it might be a person. The wind moves posters layered so thick on a column that they've become their own material. The elevator door opens on a man who's already holding his keys. Nora follows the sound with her eyes and locates nothing but the very particular nothing of a place where everything is flat. She presses record on a decoy track and walks toward the edge to get more of the city in the mic. The tick remains, indifferent to proximity, the way a sound feels bigger when it's further away. Ma'am, a security guard who is younger than she is by 10 years and older than her by his uniform. Media has to stay inside the cone. I'm just getting ambient, Nora says, her voice too soft, like she's hiding from him. She points to the headphone cups around her neck. No faces. He nods in the imprecise way of someone who knows the rules could be interpreted one way or another, and chooses mercy. Nora steps back to the cone, which is a loop of neon string on plastic tripods, the color of children's cereal. She looks down through spaces between floors, where light drops like cold water. Her heart tests the rhythm, the way it tests stairs, beating one step ahead. Tick. 1001. Tick. 1001. When her fingers find the square plastic beneath her sweater, she curls them into a fist instead. She has promised herself not to look at the scar before any on-location job. She has not promised not to think about it. The missing poster is new cardboard with a printer's blue that has not yet learned to fade. The man in the photograph smiles in the constrained way of a driver's license who knows his hair will be wrong 12 hours later. Underneath, last seen leaving work at 5:12 p.m. The mall man did retail. The river driver worked nights at the same mall. Maybe a town is just a handful of places that teach people to go missing in similar ways. That's not a pattern. It's poverty. The tick is the only thing that feels like a line that connects, and lines like that are almost always the ones you draw yourself. She takes the deck home and does work she shouldn't do off the clock. She lines the ticks up from 3 days of calls stacks them like slides. Tempo holds. The frequency shape is the same. The dynamic breath of the ambient is the only difference. She turns the volume down and hears it anyway. Just like she will hear a song she doesn't like, years after the last time someone made her listen. She tries to think of the objects that belonged to her grandfather. A barometer, the shortwave radio, the metronome that used to live on the top of his piano, dark wood with a brass pendulum that clicked with a stubborn dignity. She had put her finger under the weighted bob when she was a child to stop it, and learned more about consequence in that moment than the adults hoped she would. Stop one thing, another bends. She falls asleep on the couch with the deck on the table and wakes at 3 to the sound of a neighbor dragging a basket, coins in a machine, a door that sticks and then gives. Her heart knocks once, hard against the box under her clavicle, and then understands it has nothing to prove. She listens for the tick and hears only the water hammer in the pipe behind her head. The next morning, she goes early to the station. Before Trina, before the interns. Because a thought will grow teeth if you feed it too many other people. She searches the audio library for old 911 calls that had nothing to do with this season's story. And the station's system gives her a list of dates that look like the edge of a diary. 5 years back, a house fire on the north side. 2 alarms, no fatalities. She remembers that one because the arson task force made a show of promising they'd find the match. She finds a call where a neighbor says she smelled something like pennies and hot paint at 3 in the morning. And someone laughs softly on the line because of the way people laugh. When they are afraid, their voice will curl into a cry. Nora listens to the flames eat air and finds the tick. Steady as an agreement, she scrolls further. A domestic dispute in a second-floor apartment over a package that went missing. A crash on the bypass that turned out to be a trampoline in wind. The tick holds, not in every call, not under birthdays gone wrong, not in the calls where kids played with the phone and giggled at the operator until an adult noticed, but under a certain kind of panic near certain corners of the city, under an overpass where water collects in the seams and freezes a day earlier than the block with the coffee place and the cobblestones. Time and place and a small mechanical insistence, like someone teaching himself how to breathe at an exact rate. She tells herself not to say anything to Trina yet, because she will sound like someone who wants a story, rather than someone who found one. She buys a notebook with a blue cover that can disappear into a messenger bag without calling attention to itself, and writes times and places, and a note from a county report she finds online. 2 years ago, a series of nuisance fires set in dumpsters behind the mall. Nobody hurt. A person of interest, described as male, late 20s to mid-40s, which means a human being. You look like you picked a fight with your coffee, Trina says, dropping into the edit suite chair with a hip bump, a plastic container of cut apples sweating on the lid. What are we on? Follow up on the parking deck, Nora says, and her mouth does the thing where it looks like she is not telling everything, which is its own bad habit. Trina chews, swallows. You get headaches when you stay in here too long? Sometimes. You should drink more water, Trina says. Everyone's dehydrated. I read that. Also, did you send me that cleaned version of the fisherman thing? I want to try it under the walk and talk. I'll send it, Nora says, and then, because if she doesn't say something now, she won't later. Do you think we could request all calls from the last 5 years that originated within a half mile of the mall, just to see if there's a... ... A trend? Trina's lip quirks. I can try, but the FOIA lady hates me this month. Why? Ambient consistency, Nora says, and is proud of how neutral she makes the word ambient sound. Could help. Trina studies her the way you look at a song that you know but can't place. I'll ask, she says, and then points with a cube of apple at the little scar peeking over Nora's collarbone. Does that bug you when you wear seatbelts? It's fine, Nora says, and tucks the collar. It's quiet if I am. You are, Trina says, and smiles like a compliment that also takes care of you. Quiet and scary effective. When the FOIA comes back with a partial dump of calls, half redacted, times without addresses, addresses without times, Nora treats it like a puzzle, a bored god left in a waiting room. She listens to an argument between a landlord and a tenant, where a smoke alarm chirps every 48 seconds. A bird with a laryngitis problem. She listens to a woman who has locked herself out of her car and cries when the operator tells her that's not a police matter, and then stops when she says, never mind, her brother's coming. Beneath both, in a way that is almost too quiet to be there, until she hums it under her breath, she finds the tick, and then once she hears it, she can't unhear it if she tries. She starts to carry the deck home, like she used to carry a book she couldn't stop reading, even while walking, stopping at corners to make sure she doesn't walk into traffic. The city impresses itself on tape. Street fines that are sentences, chain clank, bus brake sigh, the slap of a poster surrend, and a beat that is not a drum. Tick, her keys in her door. Tick, the laundromat earning. Tick, she starts to hear it, under the quiet of her own apartment, in the few seconds it takes the air to settle after the door seals, and then she remembers the thing she already knows. A brain will make patterns out of nothing if you give it silence and a pen. So she stops writing for 2 days, which is how she knows she is not going to be able to stop thinking about it. On the 3rd day, she drives a route that connects the calls on her map, a loop that does not look like a loop until she notices It does. The mall to the river, to the overpass, to the parking deck, and back. A shadow line you could mistake for the path of a point in a city that is watching you. She parks by the mall's north entrance, where weeds have learned more about wire fences than the engineers who wrote about them in 1983. She puts her mic up to the chain link and captures the sound of steel rusting, which is very close to the sound of nothing. Inside, dark escalators, fairy dust. A pigeon has made a high home near a skylight and sounds exactly like a sound effect of a pigeon. Nora holds her breath until her chest sends a notice. She exhales. Tick. It could be a time clock somewhere in the bowels of the service hallways, still punching for no one. It could be an HVAC component dying for a decade. It could be her. The spot under her collar is quiet, except for the pressure. The doctor showed her the X-rays once. Wires thinner than thread. The battery like a short word. The machine that will not tell her when it changes its mind. She remembers the hospital's hall length, the maintenance man's mop swinging like a metronome, a nurse who said, "You'll come to forget," and the way forgetting feels like placing a glass in an exact place and never being able to find it again. In the service corridor, a red exit sign leaks into dark. Nora swings the beam of her phone flashlight and picks up a dented metal rectangle with a cracked clear cover screwed to the wall. A fire alarm bell, the kind with a hammer that strikes from the inside. She stands there too long, waiting for it to move. It doesn't. Of course, it doesn't. She records it anyway, because she will want the wrong sounds to eliminate later, to show herself how they are not the thing she is following. By the river bend, a boy in a red coat throws stones too big for the arc he intends and makes a show of not caring. His mother calls his name, and he hardens in the way children do when they want a witness. A man in hip waders leans against a tree and watches the water like it owes him something. Nora walks the edge, where the land decides how much of itself to give up in a flood. She holds the mic low. The river says the letter S for a mile. Tick, tick. It is not until she is on the ferry to the island, a cheap detour, an excuse to feel the deck move, that she notices the man with the gray cap has the same beat in his jaw that she hears in her headphones. He is chewing gum in a way that would not draw attention if she hadn't trained herself to count. Tick. The cap has the bend of a thing that means nothing. He has a scar that worms up from his shirt. He looks at the water with the impatience of someone who has forgotten what he came to love it for. He could be anyone. He is anyone. And now he is a shape she will recognize later if someone asks her to describe night. On the drive back, she passes the county courthouse and thinks of the flood of voices she has been rinsing for a decade. Distortions from cheap cell mics, wind on grills, grief that can't find a place to sit. She thinks of the way everyone in town becomes kin over time. You learn the names of the deputy who always clears his throat like he's about to sing, the firefighter who whistles even when he's taking a statement, the dispatcher whose voice goes down half an octave when the call gets truly bad. They are the under music. The tick is not. It's in the drywall somewhere, in the bricks. It's in the deck, even when she kills every other line. That night, the power goes out for 20 minutes, and the building is the loudest it has ever been in silence. Nail pops, hot water pipes cooling, a distant elevator somewhere deciding to settle. She holds the flashlight beam on her scar and thinks about how a night without electricity used to be a thing that brought people to windows. In the glow of a dozen phone screens, the laundry machines die and then revive. Her heart does a two-step, checks with the box, concedes. A text from Trina. "We got something. Call me." Nora calls and hears Trina's voice, thinner than it is in person. "Got a guy on record saying some version of 'I heard a ticking at the mall' to his girlfriend, like it was part of his bit about how the city is full of weird sound art installations. She said he was trying to be funny, but I don't care. Timestamped 6 months before the first missing person we tagged. Want to ride with me to ask her if she remembers exactly where he was when he said it?" "Now?" Nora asks, eyes on the clock face her phone gives her. 11:13. "I don't sleep," Trina says. "Say no, and I'll go without you." "We'll go," Nora says, "because that's how you get a thing to become a story you can hold without your hands shaking." She takes the deck, because it has become like going anywhere without her glasses. The girlfriend's apartment is up 3 flights of stairs that smell like cigarette paper in a raincoat. She was asleep and is kind about it. On her couch, she pulls a blanket around her shoulders and tries to remember the exact tone of a joke. "He said it was like the building breathed," she says. "He said it made him think of one of those metronomes they use for music class. I told him not to go there alone so much. I told him it was creepy." "He go alone at night?" Trina asks, which is the real question. "Went whenever," the girlfriend says. "Said he liked the quiet. He wasn't super social." "Always the same entrance?" Nora asks, and it feels like a personal question. "North side," the girlfriend says, "by the old arcade. He said that side ticked more than the other." "Sorry, that's a stupid sentence." "It's perfect," Trina says, "like a magic trick that makes a person feel seen." "Thank you." On the way down the stairs, Trina says, "No more pretending this is nothing, Rains. You're onto a thing." "It could be a water meter somewhere in the basement," Nora says, which is the most boring sentence she can think of, because the only thing that will save her from her idea is something boring. "Then we learn about water meters," Trina says, and smiles with her teeth, because she knows stories survive on the difference between what could be true and what is true but isn't exciting. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," Nora lies. She counts the beats between 2 landings and finds herself walking in time with something she can feel all over. The week becomes a collection of places where the tick hides. A culvert that remembers rain. A brickworks that was supposed to become condos. A church basement where the AA meeting talks over coffee. They ask the simple question, "Do you hear this?" and Nora shows a clip on her phone. And sometimes people do, and sometimes they squint, because they think they are supposed to. Red herrings flock. A man in a green jacket, who shows up in too many places, turns out to be a school custodian with a second job. A white van is a florist. A pair of boots at the river means someone went fishing in winter. The first time a tip feels like more than air, it's from a maintenance worker at the old library. A red stone building that looks permanent enough to pretend it can't be erased. If it's a timer, he says, we pulled a dozen of those out when they shut down the analog bells. Some we left. Wiring nonsense. Want to see the room? It's a basement under a basement. A place where stone sweats, and it smells like cold iron. And something else she doesn't trust her nose to name. He shows them a grid of dead machines, metal enclosures with faded labels, West Wing chime, East clock, auditorium bell. Nora puts her ear close and hears the honest quiet of things that used to make noise. We decommissioned these when they went digital, he says. Old system had a master we could never find. Master, Trina says, already writing the line in her head. Like a central metronome? Like a control, he says. Not wrong. Runs the whole show. Weird box nobody can find in these old places. It's always buried where a contractor didn't want to see it. Why bury it? Nora asks. Because it's never going to break, he says, laughing at the way men laugh about things that break every day. Because someone paid to make it pretty upstairs and told us not to worry about downstairs. After, in the street where the sky does that invasive gray, that is a weather system's way of reminding you it doesn't care, Trina says, we need a map of city buildings, older than, 1970? And a retired facilities guy, and a historian, and a cop who likes us. We need someone who knows where they hid the master, Nora says, thinking of a box in a wall. The cop who likes Trina is the throat clearer from dispatch days, now in a suit he hasn't made peace with. He listens to the tick Nora plays him and thinks of a mechanical laundry timer in his mother's basement. We still get noise complaints about the mall, he says, even after we cut the power to 90% of it. Something's drawing. I wouldn't put it past the building to be alive in the ways buildings are alive. Something like a time clock? Trina asks. He shrugs. Or an amateur, he says. We've had more than one, with a toolkit and a dream. The retired facilities man is the second kind of lead. The kind who wants a story to be his at the end, no matter who tells it. He takes them to a defunct factory floor that has been a church and a startup incubator. And now is a place where furniture goes to be reupholstered. There, he says, triumphant, pointing at a metal cabinet with a lock too clean for its door. Inside, a mass of wire, like a whole bird's nest, and under it, a brass pendulum, still as taxidermy. Master, he says, tapping the glass and making a clownish face. Hook that to a dozen writers' rooms, and you've got a plot. Nora hears only the hollow knock of old glass. The third lead is the one that makes her throat close. A voicemail left on the newsroom line at 2:04 in the morning. A man who says he knows what the ticking is because he made it. His voice is thin, like someone on a payphone in the cold. "You keep playing it on TV," he says. "That thing under the sound, that's mine. I didn't mean for anyone to hear it." He gives a place, the north entrance of the mall, by the arcade, because of course he does. Trina forwards it to Nora with a time to meet and the brisk text of a person who has to organize her fear to use it. "We go in daylight. Bring your Boy Scout kit." Nora's kit is a roll of gaff tape, spare batteries, a multi-tool, a flashlight, a phone charger, and a sandwich in wax paper. Because hunger is no excuse to make a mistake. The square beneath her collarbone presses its reminder into the thread of her sweater like a coin rubbing through denim. They park where the chain link ends because someone cut it, and makeshift never holds. Nora's slipperiness with rules feels like a thin film that only forms when she's with someone braver than she is. Trina looks like a person who walks through rooms that don't know yet that she's permission. The entrance smells like quittance, glue that never dried, air that waited too long for a door. In the arcade, posters fade into retro. A neon hot dog sign is a fossil of a joke. They stand very still and listen. The tick is there, faint, like a memory your mouth could smudge if you say it out loud. The voicemail voice arrives 10 minutes later. A man whose shape does not match the one in Nora's head, which is relief. Middle height, middle everything. A nervousness that attaches to objects rather than people. He holds a small case, like a child holds a pet carrier. "You're the reporter," he says to Trina, then corrects himself to the word that will help him more. "Producer. I've seen you. You always wear that bracelet." "I do," Trina says, "because it's true. This is Nora. She's the person who can hear things." The man smiles like someone who is about to cry and doesn't want to. "I fix machines," he says. "I fixed these once, when they were still pretending to be alive. Sometimes I make art out of the things that get thrown away. I shouldn't say art, that's stupid. I wire things. I find a pattern in the way they breathe. I thought if I made the mall breathe at a steady pace, people would leave it alone, like it was sleeping." He is embarrassed in a way that makes Nora want to put down her tape and hold his hand. "You wired a timer," Trina says, gentle. "A few," he says. He opens the case like he's never done it for anyone else. Inside are what look like old metronomes stripped of their wood. A clockwork heart with teeth. A pendulum weight that clicks when you fix it in the air. The brass smells like a penny under a tongue. He shows them how you mount the thing behind a wall and let all the other dead wires hide it. "It was supposed to be a kindness," he says. "A heartbeat for a place that was dying." "Why under 911 calls?" Trina asks, and the man blinks like he doesn't know the script for this question yet. "I don't know," he says. "Under the ones you picked, is where you can hear it. Maybe because you wanted a certain story to be louder. Nora looks down at her hands. The room shifts in her peripheral vision, and she realizes it's not the room. It's the way her thoughts are rotating around something heavy and small. "Where's the master?" she asks, because she doesn't have space in her chest to say the other thing. "In the power room," he says, "but it's not a master like you think. Each breath is its own. The trick was to tune them so the building felt like one." "Show us," Trina says. They follow him through corridors that feel designed by someone who hated straight lines. The power room is bigger than the idea of it, and smaller than the stories it holds. He points to a gray cabinet with no lock and opens it to show them a board studded with the small skeletons of machines. He taps a pedal that clicks, and in the hush of the room, the tick is closer to a real sound than it has been anywhere else. Nora's chest answers, without being asked. Tick. The edges of her vision gather, and she puts a hand out to steady herself without letting anyone see it. "I can turn it off," the man says, and is either offering her mercy or asking for it. "Leave it," Trina says, because she hears the line that will survive into the cut. What does a city sound like when you turn its heart off? "We need to talk to you on camera. Later. We'll disguise you if you want." The man shakes his head. "I'm not the story," he says. "I'm somebody's bad idea." He touches the metal like it's skin. You hear it because you wanted to. Most people hear what they expect. You're like me. That's not a compliment. After, Nora can't tell the difference between her headache and the fluorescent light and the adrenaline and the small square under her collar, complaining about the way she is holding her body. In the evening, she puts her head on her kitchen table and hears the tick in the wood, or her blood, or the deck left on. Her phone hums. Trina, already cutting, already turning the breath of a dead building into a narrative people will watch at 11:35. "I'm making a thread," she texts. "We can't connect it to the disappearances without being irresponsible. But we can talk about how places keep time." The story airs 2 nights later, and people who love this town feel the way the producer wants them to feel, about the ways buildings become ghosts you can live with. The missing people are a B block. The tick is now a thing the city thinks it can name. That night, Nora wakes with a start at 2:16, with the thought fully assembled before she knows she was thinking it. The calls where the tick was loudest were the ones she remastered for re-air after the first time they ran. The fisherman, the parking deck woman's voicemail, the mall man. She looks at her file list and sees the version names with the date and her initials, NR, in the corner, like a signature she didn't know would matter. Her hands go cold. She opens the originals. The tick is there. She opens the masters she made at 3 in the morning more than once. Because sometimes you love your job in a way that isn't healthy. The tick is louder. She scrolls through her own effect stacks. She sees the notch, the dehum, the dynamic amplifier. On one, she sees a compression sidechain keyed to a low-frequency gate she uses when she wants a breath, to surface without making it sound like a ghost. The key is a sample named with the kind of laziness that is all consequence. Heart 72 BPM. A bed she designed for a podcast about running. A soft bed of footfalls to creep under an ad about endurance. She has been using her own beat to coax the calls into clarity. She finds the sample. She tries to hear it as a separate thing. She hears what she hears. Tick. The room pulls away from the corners, like a ship. She sits on the floor because a floor knows what to do with you. She pulls her sweater down and presses her fingers into the square under her clavicle, so hard that the plastic talks back. She wants it to tell her anything other than what it is, a thing that keeps her. The next morning, she says nothing. She takes the deck to the mall and stands by the north entrance, like a person who believes she will hear what she needs to if she waits. The tick is there because she can count. She records air for 3 minutes. Back home, she lays her sample under it and moves the phase until the two sounds cancel. At one position, for one breath, the room goes dead. Her sample is not the mall's breath, and it is also exactly the mall's breath when she makes it be. When she is sure enough of anything to be wrong, she drives to the river and stands on the bank where the boy threw stones and drops her own stone into the same shallow and listens to the timing of circles. Tick. She layers the sample under the water and moves the phase until silence sits. It is the kind of test that makes you think science is a kindness until it isn't. In her chest, a rhythm checks itself against an expectation and agrees, like a good student. She goes to the parking deck and hears the same agreement and wants to scream at the city for being vulnerable to tricks it didn't ask to be part of. By the time she's back at the station, she feels like her teeth don't belong to her. She sits in the edit suite and opens a file of her own voice, reading a placeholder line into the mic 3 months ago. "This is a test," she says in the recording, bored, thinking about lunch. And under it is the tick, because she has taught herself to match a thing that is inside her to things that are not. She closes the file like someone slams a door, because the night is not the night you want to be in. She tells Trina because secrets rot. "It's me," she says, the words tasting like metal. "It's not. I mean, the tick is in the world. The machines exist. People heard them. But under the calls where it hit hard, I made it louder without meaning to. I used my sample as a key. I think I increased the bleed. It sounded like the world, because I wanted it to be the world, so I could hear it." Trina sits very still in the chair and looks at Nora like she is trying to keep her in the room by making her stay with her eyes. "Are you telling me we manufactured the beat of a story?" she asks, soft, not accusing. "We didn't," Nora says. "I did. I wanted coherence. The calls that scared me, I wanted them to be talking to each other, so I could hear a sentence. That's my fault." Trina exhales through her nose, like she does when a line doesn't land. Okay, she says. We fix it. We correct. We do a follow-up about how hearing is not meteorology. No one thinks we're omniscient. People will be mad. People are always mad. We just don't point fingers where we can't. We point one. She lifts a finger, taps the air. Here, Nora nods and doesn't trust herself to say thank you, because the word would carry other words behind it. The correction airs 2 nights later, in the spot where a feel-good would have eased sleep. A measured 3 minutes about confirmation bias and audio artifacts. About the dangers of building a map from places that were never supposed to be near each other. The metronome man texts the tip line, "Sorry if I made it worse." And Nora wants to go find him and tell him he is a necessary complication. The comments descend under the station's post, like they do, with certainty disguised as opinion, disguised as certainty. Some people say it's a cover, that they're hiding the truth about the tick, because the tick is the sound of the city's old tunnels breathing, or the secret water under the mall, or a cult. One person writes, "I hear the tick when I try not to." And Nora deletes that one twice in her head. She sleeps 3 hours and dreams that the metal under her skin softens and crawls away like an animal that knows it will be better off elsewhere. The week after, a body surfaces downriver from the bend, and the town pretends again it knows the middle chapters of a story whose ending it will only ever guess. The man from the parking deck is still missing. Someone sets a dumpster on fire behind the mall again, and a night shift cop puts it out with a fast understanding of how paper burns. Nora adds her apology to the apology already in the world by making sure that all the new pieces don't use the sample as a key. She returns to the way she learned to do this before she decided to teach herself shortcuts, letting the noise be what it is. The calls become multiple again, discrete rooms rather than one hall. The tick is still there in some. Machines, breath, the counting people do to not be afraid. She learns to leave it alone. She stops going to the places alone. She goes with Trina, or not at all. She gets coffee with the wife of the river driver, a woman with a voice like smooth granite, and listens to a story that has no tidy beat. Unfinished projects in a garage, a fight about groceries that was not about groceries, a laugh that does not know it has anywhere to go now. She learns that kindness has a tempo too, and it is nothing like the click she has been chasing. When the cardiologist checks the box under her clavicle at her 6-month appointment, he says everything is in order, with the kind of cheer that is a doctor's way of being careful with a life that could be rearranged by words. "You doing okay?" he asks, which is a logistical and spiritual question. "I added a drum under my job," Nora says, and waits for it to sound like a joke. "I took it out." He smiles in a way that says he hears her, and also knows he doesn't need to. "These things make people hyper-aware," he says. "You're allowed to forget it exists, you know. It will do its job even if you don't listen. What if I want to listen? She asks. A whisper, because they are in a room where people tell you what you can't help. Then listen to anything, he says. Just not only yourself. In the middle of the night, after her appointment, when the building is between the cycles of machines, and the city is the kind of quiet that only exists when people are too tired to make new noise, and the old noise has not yet remembered itself, Nora wakes because she has heard something. It is not the tick. It is the sound of her voicemail coming alive with 3 new messages within the space of a minute. She unlocks the phone and listens to a caller whose voice is level and careful. A man who says he has been hearing the tick not only at the mall, but at the courthouse, and at the church, and at the house where a boy once took back his bike from someone bigger than him. He says it followed him home in the way you describe the weather. He says it's louder when you're near. That's not an accusation. It's a fact. The second voicemail is the same voice. I think it's older than your machines, he says. I think it's the building between buildings. The way seam sounds when you pull cloth. He gives a corner where he'll be at 10, under a street light that blinks like an eyelid. The third voicemail, left 10 seconds later, is breath. Under the breath, as though he wanted to be kind to the person who would have to listen. He hums a bar of something familiar, and then stops when he realizes he has made a mistake. Under the hum, there is a click, and for the first time since she started following it through tape and air, Nora recognizes the exact tone and the way it lands. She goes to the corner at 10, because the lesson of all this is that you go anyway. Trina texts, "Do you want backup?" And the word she chooses back is maybe, which is the word you send when you need someone to feel invited without being called. The streetlight blinks, and the man from the voicemail leans into the light, the way you do when you've decided something about what you're going to say, and you hope the light will help. He is not the metronome man from the mall. He is not the maintenance guy or the cop or the ferryman with gum. He is simpler. He is the man from the first 911 call they aired. The one in the house with the dog and the breath that turned thin. He is the one who said, "He's here." And then the signal dropped. "You're dead," Nora says, before her brain can tell her mouth not to. Which is what happens when a story pulls a kind of gravity around your throat. He smiles a humorless smile, like he's tried on a dozen jokes in his life, and none survived the dressing room. "I am to you," he says, to the cameras, to the police who needed a status. "I left. It was easier to be missing than to be the thing that made the other thing keep happening. You put my breath on the air. People heard it and thought it was theirs. That wasn't your fault. You were hungry and good at being hungry. What is it?" she asks, because she can't help herself. "The tick." He looks at the ground like the answer is there. He lifts his head. His voice is slow, in a way that is not condescension. "It's the thing that tells you what you're afraid of," he says. "For me, it was nights. For you, it's that box inside you, trying to tell you when you belong to the rhythm and when the rhythm belongs to you. For the mall guy, it's machines. For the woman in the lot, it was the self-checkout beep she heard, even when she didn't buy anything. You pushed it up because you needed to see what you were hungry for. We all do. That's not evil. That's just a way to keep the wolves at the edge." "You called 911, Nora says, and looks at his hands, imagining a phone, a dog's nails, the edge of a table with a gouge in it. "I called because I saw him in the reflection," he says, and the skin on the back of Nora's neck jumps. "He wasn't there. And then I heard you, not your tick, you, in the package. You said breathe. You said count. And I realized if I stayed, the counting would be the only thing I had. So I left, so the counting could be yours, not mine." "You think I made it," she says, and hates that it sounds like a plea. "I think you tuned it," he says, kind. "I think the city has 100 of them, and you chose one and made it loud, because that's the one that talks to you. You made other people hear it, and then they made their own. That's not on purpose. That's how air works." She looks up into the light and lets it blind her a little, a purification that doesn't take. "Are you going to let me put you back into the world?" she asks, because she is not a cop and can be a journalist without being a rescuer, as long as she says the right words. Guy shakes his head, very small. "Not yet," he says. "Maybe never. Someone will find me, because they'll hear their own beat. You don't need to be the one." He steps back into the shadow, and with the stupid heart of someone who lives on cuts, Nora expects a sound. Foot on gravel, dog nail on concrete, something, so she will have a clip to carry. The only thing that punctuates the space is the blinking of the light, a timing so regular a machine had to love it first. In the long quiet, her own square clicks on its schedule, the thing that is as real as anything else in the room. The man says, "Be careful which patterns you give away." And then he is just another person who knows how to turn a corner and become blank. When Trina finds Nora on the curb 5 minutes later, she sits without asking the question you ask when you're on a clock. They listen to the street talk. The laundromat spins. The world makes its normal, unremarkable timing. Nora knows 2 things she can hold in her hands without hurting her fingers. The tick exists out there, under boards and behind old walls, and she built an echo of it without meaning to, then believed the echo because it was hers. She feels relief at thinking both are true, which doesn't absolve her from anything except the need to pick one. "Do we have a story?" Trina asks, gently, the way you ask after childbirth. "We have a correction to the story," Nora says, and here's pinball in the words. "We have people in a city collecting the exact sounds that make them less afraid, and we have me making that affection louder and calling it evidence." "Do we have a killer?" Trina asks, because a producer's job is to ask the question the audience will, not because she wants it to be yes. "I don't know," Nora says, and means it with the weight of something that could fill more than one room. In the mosaic of unsolves that keep the station fed, a person or system or indifference is hurting people. She refuses to turn a metronome into an answer because she doesn't have one. "We have a beat," she says. "We have a heartbeat." In the months that follow, the city does what it always does when it has learned a new word. People send in recordings of their own ticks. Water meters, dryer feet, 2 coins in a glass jar that sound exactly like rain. The station runs a segment about how to fix a miscalibrated smoke detector so it won't chirp at 3 in the morning. Someone starts a band named The Sixth Beat and plays them all at dusk until security comes and asks them to leave. The policeman in the suit clears his throat on camera and asks citizens to leave the mall alone if they want to avoid getting charged with trespass. The metronome man from the power room agrees to be interviewed in silhouette, and when he says the word kindness, people online accuse him of planting bombs nobody can find. Nora walks to work more often because the stops teach her things the car can't. She collects quiet and finds where it cracks. She adds nothing to anything except the space for a breath that doesn't have to be counted. When she edits the calls that will not stop coming, she holds the impulse to tune, to align, to soothe, to make one voice step in time to another. She lets people be off by a measure. She lets the world be a drum circle that doesn't find the downbeat right away and allows the song to be that instead of a failure. Once on a Tuesday, she runs into the man from the ferry at the coffee place near the courthouse. He's not chewing gum. He's stirring sugar into his drink at a rhythm that is nobody's business. He looks up and sees her seeing him and smiles in a way that says he recognizes her as a person who listens. He lifts his cup. "To your health," he says, and means the square under her clavicle without knowing it. "Yours too," she says, and the words feel like they might be the right size for the space they need to live in. The man from the first call doesn't return to the world in a way the station can measure. A hiker finds a camp in the state forest that could be his or a dozen other men's whose lives could no longer fit in rooms. The parking deck missing poster is sun white by spring. The river says S until someone tells it a new letter. The mall breathes the way buildings die. Slowly, audibly, if you choose your mic and your lungs on a night when wind rearranges the city into a collection of suggestions, and the air tastes like pennies again for no reason she can name. Nora stands at her window above the laundromat and listens to the cycles start and stop and start. She rests her fingers on the plastic edge of the box that keeps the beat her heart mostly remembers to keep, and imagines turning a tiny screw to make it run faster or slower. The way you could shift your grandfather's metronome with one thumb so his piano students would believe their own hands. She does nothing. The light above the back door of the laundromat blinks at an inconsistent rate, a little wrong, a little alive. Between two blinks, she hears nothing at all. It's the kind of nothing that isn't an absence, but a room with chairs in it. She knows she will walk into it again. She knows she told a city that its heart was something she could edit, and then told it she was wrong, and then told it both could be true. And the only thing left is to keep listening in a way that doesn't ask the world to be more than it is. Period. If there is a twist, it is not a reversal, but a return. The tick was never a killer's calling card or a ghost's tale, never singular and never proof. It was a handful of machines waiting in old rooms and the breath of people who needed something to measure so they could stand in the doorway and watch the dark. And it was the shape of Nora's own survival, amplified. The story retells itself with that in it now. Every time someone says, "I heard it again," they are telling her what they are afraid of, and also what will get them through. She will not subtract herself from the line. She will not center herself either. She will carry the beat like a pocket watch, not to know what time it is, but to remember there is such a thing. She falls asleep before dawn and dreams that she is on a ferry crossing a river that is too narrow to justify a boat. The kind of indulgence a city allows itself when it wants to feel chosen. In the dream, the deck hums with machines and breath, and a metronome somebody left on the cafe table in the cabin keeps time for nobody. She puts a finger under the pendulum and stops it, and feels everything soften for one impossible second. Someone behind her says, "Careful," not as a warning, but as a blessing. When she lets go, the weight swings back to center and keeps going. In the morning, on the way to the station, she buys batteries she does not need. And when Trina says, "What are those for?" she says, "For not being surprised," which is maybe the same thing. The ticker under the calls fades as the city learns other words for fear, then returns when the weather shifts and the air is again a wire. People keep leaving voicemails with their recordings, their lists of places, their theories about old pipes and new demons. Nora edits and breathes and resists the urge to braid them into one for the relief of the knot. She lets them be plural, lets the story be that it does not close, even when you cut to black. In the edit bay, lights low, the room a held breath. She listens for what doesn't want to be heard and decides which of it the world can bear. What do you think the tick really was for each person in the story? And what beat do you think you've tuned your own life to without noticing?